back, two-pointer, puts it up, too strong. Rebound, Bridges tips it out to Crowder. Booker for three. DeAndre ate the rebound. Paul for three. Bang! Middle to the drive, blocked by Ayton, saved by Bridges. Soundtrack.
All right, hello everyone. Welcome back to Basketball in the Mountains. I am your host, Tyler King. This is episode 21. We are here back again talking NBA, but I do have some college coverage coming next week. As I promised, we'll be talking a little bit of Colorado Buffaloes with my guy Oliver Hayes. Recorded that episode a couple days ago, but it'll be running at early next week. But wanted to get this episode up today on Saturday, May 31st, because we are talking about the Phoenix Suns today, and there's a lot to get to, and some news could break kind of at any minute. So we're going to talk about the coaching search, which seems like there's a couple finalists that the Phoenix is narrowing down, and just kind of what's to come in this offseason, because it is a really, really interesting one that starts with whatever happens with Kevin Durant, and then there's plenty that could follow after that. So we do have another first-time guest on the show today, and that is my guy, Trevor Booth from Bright Side of the Sun on SB Nation. Trevor, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Tyler. I'm glad to be here.
All right, Trevor, this is a very interesting conversation today just because of how weird and disappointing the Suns season was overall. The reporting came out earlier this week that the Suns have kind of narrowed their coaching search. David Fizdale is a guy that seems like he's a finalist, was on the staff, was the only guy that has head coaching experience in the NBA that is among the finalists. Chris Quinn of the Heat, an assistant, Dave Bliss of the Thunder, Johnny Bryant and Jordan Ott from the Cavs, and then Sean Sweeney from the Mavs were all kind of reported as being in the mix. Does anyone in this, we'll start here, does anyone of that group stand out to you and kind of is the fact that these are majority assistants say something about where the Suns might be going with this head coaching search?
Yeah, I think no matter the direction the Suns go, it's going to be a new coach, right? And with this identity shift that they're going for, that general manager Brian Gregory and also owner Matt Ishbia have kind of stated, they're going to give somebody a shot here. I think Chris Quinn is someone that, locally, there seems to be a lot of momentum behind in terms of fans being interested in him. I've also seen Johnny Bryant get some interest from some of my fellow reporters here. I think no matter what, this is going to be a situation where they're going to have to experiment a bit and see who's going to fit next to Devin Booker. I honestly don't know who would be the right fit per se, but I would say Chris Quinn would be a guy to keep an eye on that seems to have an edge, if you will, based on what's out there.
Yeah, I mean, the last couple guys have all been former NBA head coaches that have won championships. So it feels like if the Suns were going to go that route again, former Nuggets coach Michael Malone would be an option. But it seems like they're really trying to go in a different direction this time around and not trying to have another coaching search after a year, maybe committing to a younger guy that you're really going to give him a couple of years. Does that kind of tell you anything about what the rest of the offseason could look like?
I think definitely, the situation that I want to keep my eye on is the Bradley Beal contract, right? And then how the Suns go about that. I think that's going to be really interesting because if they choose to buy him out or anything along that line, that's going to put them in a really big hole, similar to what they're in right now with the second apron. So based on what has been out there, the Kevin Durant thing, it seems like he's going to be traded, right? And they need to get as many assets back from that as possible. However, they might not even hold the cards. That might be something where Durant kind of gets to a point where he gets to go, with 1 year left on his deal and him being aging, right, and not being the player that he used to be. Not saying that he's not superstar caliber, but, he's 36 years old now. So with all that being said, I think, the direction that they're going, it's definitely in a new path, a new direction, a new era for Phoenix Suns basketball.
Yeah, that news could break at any moment once they land on their guy. I mean, are you surprised that it's taken this long, or are you kind of another sign that this is a different process is the fact that they're kind of taking their time with this?
Yeah, no, I think I'm a little surprised just because we're inching closer and closer to June, and that's where things are going to really, get interesting with the NBA offseason. I imagine it's going to drop any minute now. I know locally, John Gambadoro at Arizona Sports 98.7 has been really on top of it. He's where I've seen a lot of the reporting come, and it seems like they're down to that final group, and they're going to get, conduct all the interviews and do what they need to do. But yeah, a little surprising. I think, I'd expect it to get done soon, though.
I didn't want to spend too much time on this because, like we said, it could drop any minute, and by the time I
Right.
even post this podcast, it could be old news. But I did want to transition to Brian Gregory because it was such a fascinating GM hire for me, and kind of one that maybe came out of the blue for someone who's not in the Phoenix area and hasn't really isn't following the team as heavily as you guys that are around the team all the time. What were your initial thoughts on his hiring? And this is a huge first offseason for a guy who's really doing this for the first time. It just seems like a really unique situation with Gregory and what he's got to do this offseason.
It is. I think Matt Ishbia has really done a good job of promoting basketball here in the Valley in terms of investing in this team and investing in the resources, especially on the women's side. I don't know if you've seen
Oh yeah.
the basketball, the practice facility that they built here. But there has been some questions on whether or not he's making the right hires, in the basketball operations side. So moving James Jones away from the general manager role, I think some people expected, but at the same time, with this identity shift that they're looking for, James Jones had already built a championship level team and put that all together. So Brian Gregory is going to have to do a lot, and he's going to have to do it quickly with the Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal situation. Not having any NBA experience before, though, is something that he's going to have to prove that he can come in and do a good job. Like you said, fascinating. I'd agree.
Yeah, a former college coach, a guy that I remember from his days at various college stops. It's just a really interesting career path for him to get to where he is now. You mentioned James Jones, who obviously it was kind of expected at this point after the last 18 months or so of what he did on the job that he would not be the GM anymore and making these kinds of decisions. How different could Brian Gregory be from James Jones and how he approaches the next couple of years of Suns basketball?
Right. Good question. I think the Suns definitely have some lessons to learn, right? These first couple years under the Ishbia ownership, the big three with Beal, Booker, and Durant didn't work. So they're going to adjust here. To me, it's a little unclear the direction that they're going to go or try to go because they talk about identity, grit, all those things, competitiveness, physicality. What's that going to look like? Like, I think the main question that fans have is how are you going to get out of this bad situation? We want to see direct action and then we'll kind of trust you, for example. So I don't really know what to expect. I think that's the fun part about it, and also the scary part about it is it's going to be a different direction than what it's been the past couple of years, or at least it has to be for them to have success.
Yeah, I know. I've talked about this on the podcast a little bit. Yeah, after the trade deadline, full teardown does not seem tenable for what Matt Ishbia wants to do, and trading Devin Booker would be the only real way out of the hole that the
Right.
Suns are in. But even that is like I've been a huge Devin Booker fan for a long time, and I just don't think that's really wise for Phoenix to do. But the Durant and Beal conversation we'll get to in a bit. But I wanted to quickly touch on the draft coming up because it is a big draft ahead for the Suns, a team that has not made a lot of picks in recent years. Last year kind of hit the lottery with both Ryan Dunn and Oso Ighodaro, both looking like guys that could be pieces of an NBA rotation going forward. They similarly have another pick at the back end of the first round and a back end of the second round. It's a really weird era of the draft as someone who really pays attention to it and it covers heavily. And I'll be talking about all the guys that the Jazz can be targeting with their first round picks. And then I'll be talking about some of the back end guys for Phoenix as we get closer to the draft. But for you, how important is it for the Suns to at least get one of these picks right? And are there any guys that you're looking at right now at the back end of the first round? Because like I said, it is a new era of the NBA draft where guys that you would normally see stay in are going back to college to make more money.
Mm-hmm.
Like the back end of the first round and especially the second round just aren't as valuable maybe as they used to be even 2, 3, 4 years ago. So, but there are still guys to be found there, like a lot of older guys, and it's a lot of those kind of plug and play guys. Is there anybody that you've kind of identified at the back end of the first round that would be ideal if the Suns could grab them?
Yeah, not exactly yet. I know that's coming up, and that's something I have to get to. But I will say that they have to strike on this draft. Last year they did a good job. I guess Brian Gregory was really involved in that draft and getting Oso Ighodaro and Ryan Dunn. But specifically at 29, right? Like I imagine this is going to be a pick where there has to be, some pressure from Suns fans, like, hey, we don't have a lot of options here. So finding the right guy, finding the right fit, and also meshing with this identity is going to be super important in this draft.
Yeah, the ESPN's initial mock draft that came out after the lottery had Walter Clayton from Florida. Obviously,
Yeah,
everyone who watched the Final Four knows who he is, one of the best players in college basketball. I have him a little bit higher on my personal big board, so I would maybe be a little bit surprised if he fell that far. But that would be a great addition, just kind of
yeah.
the 6-man bench kind of guy. Another guy that I had identified really quickly, wanted to give another name, was Ryan Kalkbrenner, a veteran guy from Creighton. Seems like he could come in and be a plug and play guy at either starting center or backup center, depending on kind of how Phoenix likes him. He's just kind of your typical rim running defense first center. So that would be interesting fit for Phoenix if either of those guys came to fruition. But I did want to obviously talk about what's to come in this offseason as well. And you hinted at it. Kevin Durant is the first thing on the docket. Like, it starts with him. Like, you can't really do anything else until the Kevin Durant situation is resolved. I mean, at this point, are you just fully expecting him to be traded? And what could those packages even look like? Or is it, or you kind of alluded to this as well, is it kind of be dependent on where KD wants to go? Because does only have 1 year left, and he's got all the leverage in the world in terms of his stature that he could kind of facilitate himself to go where he wants.
I am expecting him to get traded. I've heard that, Houston, right? I think I
Yeah.
saw the report from the Athletic, Kelly Iko, who said that the interest mutually might not be there, but Houston's a package that could happen. I know Jalen Green's been mentioned as a player that could be centered around that trade. More recently, I've also heard San Antonio and the Spurs could also be a team that winds up getting Kevin Durant. I imagine they'd want to hold on to some of their young players as much as possible. So maybe something around, Keldon Johnson or a Devin Vassell type trade might
Yeah.
net Phoenix back. But I think if you're the Suns, you got to get assets as much as possible in that trade. So those would be the two teams that I'm looking at for Kevin Durant.
Yeah, obviously Houston has the Phoenix has a lot of Phoenix's future draft picks, so that would be
Mm-hmm.
interesting. If they're obviously not going to get all of that back, but getting some of that back would be interesting. And like you said, San Antonio, I thought was interesting as well. Obviously, you're not going to get the number 2 overall pick. That's not something San Antonio is
Yeah,
going to move unless it comes up in a Giannis trade. But Devin Vassell would be interesting. Keldon Johnson. They've got some plenty other young guys. Maybe it's Steph Castle they want to build the trade around. I doubt that after his kind of impressive rookie season, but all of that is really interesting. And then I think the Minnesota conversation could come back. There was plenty of reporting after the trade deadline that it seemed like it was pretty close for KD going to the T-Wolves, whether that's Naz Reid, who's got a player option, or Julius Randle being the centerpiece of that trade from a monetary standpoint. How interesting would that be? I mean, obviously KD and Ant got pretty close last year, seemingly at the Olympics, having a good relationship. I mean, is that another option you're kind of looking at?
yeah, I think that's definitely one I'd put behind Houston and San Antonio. But yes, mutual interest. And I know Anthony Edwards loves Kevin Durant, has said that he's his favorite player, and would love something like that. And with them, not reaching expectations or getting to the finals like they wanted to, they maybe got to find something out in order to get to that next step, and get in front of Oklahoma City, who just beat them in 5 games. So yes, definitely another team there.
And the last one I wanted to bring up, just because they always come up with star conversation, is Miami.
Hmm.
I guess they have a future Warriors pick, I think, or is that, I think that was the one in this year's draft. But Miami does have a couple draft picks. They're not going to trade Tyler Hero, obviously, but they do have some contracts they could build around. Is that something that interests you at all? Or obviously you mentioned Houston and San Antonio as
Yeah,
the top two. Just like if KD makes it pretty clear he wants to go to Miami, what would you be
yeah.
looking back for in that kind of deal?
Yeah, I think definitely that pick you mentioned, maybe getting back another player or two who can contribute right now. Just because, with the Suns, they're trying to, this seems to be more of a retool, or that's the vision, right, with this roster. So getting a player that would help them right now, I think would be a priority in a Miami trade.
Yeah, and then I wanted to transition to the Bradley Beal conversation too, because you mentioned that. Like, it feel like they're like all options are on the table this summer. I mean, they're probably going to try to trade him again. That's
Yeah,
likely not going to come to fruition. Does it actually seem realistic that they could try to come to some sort of buyout and waive and
yeah.
stretch agreement with him?
I think that's, something that they're looking at, or, based on conversations that I've seen just floating around in local reporting, that's something that they are looking at. I know John Gamadoro at Arizona Sports has said there's a 0% chance that Bradley Beal is back on next year's roster. So I think all options are on the table for him.
Why do you think it went so wrong with Bradley? I just he's a guy that I liked, especially 3, 4, 5 years ago in Washington. Got to watch him a lot. I mean, it just I don't know. It really felt like it was kind of a low risk with what the Suns gave up, but then it became you're taking on the contract and still with 2 years left on his deal, the no trade clause. I mean, just why has this gone so south?
I think a couple of reasons. I think, Bradley Beal wanted to come here expected to win. And I think when you're not winning, frustration kicks in. He had a couple nagging injuries throughout the first season here that he was in Phoenix, and then that carried over into the second season. And I think fans were wondering, like, okay, is Bradley Beal like actually, is he the player that we, expected him to be? That led to some frustration of fans, yelling at his family, like during games. His wife put out a social media statement. So I think a lot of things, but when you're not winning and when you're not coming here and doing what you expected to do, and coaches moving in and out, I think just collectively, it just was, with those things, I think it just didn't work. And sometimes that happens. The Suns made a big gamble. It didn't work. I know people question the fit next to Devin Booker and them being two guards and not really having a point guard between the two. You can point to that also, but I think just with those two things, the injuries and a lot of change, I think it just didn't work. And you leave it at that.
Were you surprised with just how quickly this past season went south? I mean, I was kind of high on Phoenix going into the year. I liked Coach Bud coming in. I liked some of the offseason additions, whether it was Tyus Jones, Monty Morris, Mason Plumlee, and some of the draft picks obviously worked out pretty well. I mean, it just felt like everything else surrounding that went quite wrong. I mean, just kind of I don't know if you were expecting them to even be a top 6 team in the West, but for at least maybe bare minimum a play-in team. At what point did you feel like the season was maybe lost, and how surprising was it at that point?
I think when we saw, because they started the season 8-1 and things seemed to
Yeah,
be going well for them. I think when we saw Kevin Durant go out and just how much they struggled without him, it's like, okay, if something else happens, like if a Booker goes down, Beal, Durant, one of the three, this could get really bad. Guys were forced to step up in their roles. I know Yusuf Nurkic had mentioned that he hadn't talked to Coach Budenholzer in a month in an interview, so there seemed to be some frustration internally. I think once we hit like right before the New Year point, I was going to kind of tell it was going to be really difficult for this team to turn it around based on those two things, and that ended up being the case. I mean, even when they got Nick Richards from Charlotte, that was a missing piece to get like an athletic big type player, and it, just wasn't enough. And I think that was the case for this year's team.
what other offseason moves could be coming or what would you be looking to do to help kind of reset this roster and retool? Like you said, obviously Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal comes first, like we said, but what other moves could be made this summer once those situations are solved? What would you be looking to do to kind of, like I said, reset and retool this group?
Yeah, I think it all starts with Kevin Durant and really seeing what you can get back from that, and then that kind of sets the tone for the rest of the offseason. It's been a little, you mentioned Devin Booker. I think that he should be out there too, just because he's getting to the tail ender. He hasn't been the same player that he's been in the finals and the 2022 season, seemingly. I think for the best case scenario for this team, you got to get out of that second apron and the luxury tax. That's not what they're going to do. They've, seemed to indicate that Devin Booker is going to be back and they're going to continue to build around him. But that's going to be a challenge, especially if you do decide to do the stretch and wave with Bradley Beal. So I think it all depends on what they get back from Durant, and then they got to make some decisions from there.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like they'll be bargain bin hunting again in the free
Yeah,
agent market. I saw uh, there's some Russell Westbrook rumors. I mean, as
yeah.
someone who watched that up close and personal this past year, wouldn't advise. But I mean, hey, the Phoenix is a little bit desperate. But um, I think I just it's really going to be a fascinating offseason. Like what the roster actually looks like when the team shows up at training camp in September is just
Yeah.
going to be really, really fascinating. And like you said, if they're able to move from Bradley Beal like is kind of expected, if they're able to get kind of anything back for Kevin Durant, whether that's players or assets, I think next year is probably going to be, regardless, not, I wouldn't say a wash, but like a transition year. You're going to have a new head coach, and then you're going to be looking maybe towards the following offseason to maybe reassessing the Devin Booker situation, and seeing what you have with what you got back, and how you can kind of build around Devin if you want to do that, or just kind of completely tear it down. I mean, do you feel like, I mean, at this time, 12 months from now, I'm asking a lot out of you, a kind of prediction, but what this team looks like 12 months from now could be vastly, vastly different.
Absolutely. I think, like you said, if this thing doesn't work, and they're not a playoff team or where they want to be, they have to look at that with Devin Booker. He's expected to get the 2 year, I think, $75 million extension, and he's going to get that. But if this team isn't where he wants it to be, if it's not where Matt Ishbia wants it to be, that's something that could be on the table. Is Devin Booker really gonna lose some of his prime years on not pursuing a championship? I think that's a question, that needs to be answered, based on how they do this year.
Yeah, it's been a tough and long fall from the 2021 finals, when being up 2-0 and being that close to a championship, and seeing 4 years later where the team is at, and kind of being in an unenviable situation across the league, despite Matt Ishbia having that infamous quote saying 26 of the 29 other teams would take would swap situations with them. That quote's going to live with him for a little bit. But all right, Trevor, I appreciate you coming on the podcast today and making your first appearance. We'll definitely have you back on at some point during the offseason, whenever news shakes out with Phoenix, and kind of once things start to take shape with next year's team. So like I said, I really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, Tyler. I appreciate it.
All right, that'll do it from today's episode of Basketball in the Mountains. As always, you can subscribe on Apple or Spotify or wherever you like to get your podcasts, or you can subscribe to my YouTube channel at King_Tyler B. All the podcasts are posted there in video form if you prefer to watch them. Really appreciate anybody that does watch, like, comment, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. It is super appreciated by me. Like I said at the top, got an episode coming early next week with my guy Oliver Hayes that I already recorded, talking some CU buffs and their strange offseason as well. And then we'll get back into some NBA stuff later in the week as we get ready to preview the draft and get ready to talk about who the Jazz could be targeting at number 5. We're gonna really dive deep into my big board and kind of my personal evaluations of all these options for Utah. So a lot coming this month, despite all the teams that we cover on this podcast, their seasons being over and being fully into the offseason. We'll talk some Nuggets again as well once the GM hire is made. So and like I said, we'll be getting into plenty of more college stuff throughout the offseason as well, hoping to get some cool and special guests on. So really appreciate everybody for watching and listening, and have a good weekend.